Commander Zeph Callan stood in the crystal communication chamber of Vulcan Prime, his deer-like features twisted with desperation. The soft blue light that normally brought peace to his people now felt cold and empty. Outside the floating city, the cloud forests swayed in gentle winds, but beauty meant nothing when death was coming from the stars. His long fingers trembled as he activated the galaxy-wide broadcast system. The message would reach every known species, every civilization that had achieved space travel. Some would listen, most would ignore it, but he had to try. "This is Commander Zeph Callan of the Vulcan Republic," he began, his voice carrying across the void between stars. "We are a peaceful confederation of 12 star systems. For 300 years, we have lived in harmony with all life. We have never raised weapons against another sentient being. We have never known war." He paused, the weight of his next words crushing down on him. "We are dying. The Scarith Horde has come to our worlds. They consume everything. They take our people and turn them into fuel for their ships. 4 of our worlds are already gone. 8 remain, but not for long." The broadcast continued automatically, sending images of the destruction: crystalline cities reduced to ash, forests stripped bare, the bodies of his people scattered across once beautiful landscapes. The Scarith ships looked like massive insects, made of metal and crystal, their hulls gleaming with organic fluids. "We have tried to communicate with them," Zeph continued. "They do not speak as we do. They think as one mind, and that mind wants only to consume. We offer them resources, technology, even entire uninhabited worlds. They take what we offer and kill us anyway." His voice broke slightly. "We know we are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We know we are not the smartest. But we are asking for help. Any help. We do not want to die forgotten in the darkness." The message ended, and Zeph collapsed into his chair. Around him, other Vulcan officials watched with hollow eyes. They had sent similar messages for weeks. The response was always the same. The hegemony species, with their advanced technology and vast fleets, sent polite refusals. They called the Vulcans too primitive and not worth the resources. The Kran Empire, known for their military might, simply ignored the messages entirely. Smaller species expressed sympathy but offered no real help. Days passed. The Scarith ships moved closer to the remaining Vulcan worlds. Their scouts had already been seen in the outer system. Time was running out. Then something unexpected happened. A reply came from a small yellow star on the edge of known space. The species called themselves humans, and they came from a world called Earth. The message was brief and came through military channels. "We received your distress call. Help is coming. Stand firm." Zeph stared at the message in confusion. He had never heard of humans before. A quick search through the galactic databases revealed very little. Earth was a small planet with only one intelligent species. They had achieved space travel recently and had fought several wars among themselves. Most species considered them primitive and violent. "Why would they help us?" asked Prime Counselor Thera Winson, her graceful form moving like flowing water. "What do they want in return?" Zeph had no answer. The human message included no demands, no conditions, no requests for payment. It was simply a promise to help. More messages came from other species, but they all said the same thing. The humans were too new to space travel to be effective. They had no major fleet, no superweapons, no special technology. Some species warned that humans might be more dangerous than the Scarith themselves, but the humans had promised to come, and the Vulcans had no other choice. On Earth, in the chambers of the Sol Defense Council, Admiral Lisa Grant reviewed the Vulcan message for the 5th time. The holographic display showed the destruction across 4 star systems, the methodical consumption of entire worlds. "It's genocide," she said quietly to her staff. "Pure and simple." Captain Jake Morrison, a weathered man with scars from the Titan mining wars, leaned forward. The Scarith are apex predators. They've never faced real resistance. Look at their attack patterns. They're efficient, but predictable. What are you suggesting? Admiral Grant asked. Morrison smiled, and there was something predatory in his expression. We're apex predators too. We just forgot it for a while. The council chamber fell silent. Humanity had spent the last century trying to prove they were civilized, trying to gain respect among the older galactic species. But the recordings from Vulcan space showed something that awakened older instincts. The Vulcans asked for help, Morrison continued. They didn't ask for diplomats or traitors. They asked for help. And we know how to help. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, the expedition's xenobiologist, pulled up data on both species. The Vulcans evolved from herbivores. They have no concept of predation beyond basic survival. The Scarith are hive-minded insects. They think in terms of consumption and expansion. Sergeant Ben Clark, a specialist in psychological warfare, studied the Scarith communication patterns. They've never encountered psychological resistance. Their entire strategy depends on fear and overwhelming force, but they've never faced prey that fights back intelligently. Admiral Grant looked around the room at her officers. These were veterans of humanity's expansion into space, soldiers who had fought pirates and corporate armies. They had been looking for a real challenge, a real enemy. Operation Shepherd's Crook is approved, she said finally. We'll send a small task force. Fast ships, elite personnel, and everything we've learned about warfare. The meeting ended with detailed planning. The humans would not send a massive fleet. They would not try to match the Scarith in terms of raw power. Instead, they would send something the galaxy had never seen before. A small group of humans who understood that being an apex predator was not about size or strength. It was about intelligence, adaptability, and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect those who could not protect themselves. As the task force prepared to launch, Morrison looked out at the stars and thought about the Vulcans waiting for help. They had asked for salvation, not knowing that Earth was about to send its most dangerous children to answer their call. The galaxy was about to learn what humans meant when they said they would help. The USS Nightfall dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vulcan system, like a shadow given form. The destroyer's black hole absorbed light rather than reflecting it, and its weapon arrays were designed for one purpose: killing things efficiently. To the peaceful Vulcans, monitoring their space, it looked like death itself had come calling. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the beautiful blue-green world of Vulcan Prime grow larger on the main screen. Floating cities drifted through the clouds above vast forests, their crystal spires catching sunlight and throwing rainbows across the sky. It was the most peaceful sight he had ever seen, and it made him angry that something wanted to destroy it. "Captain," called Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her station. "We're receiving a transmission from the planet. They're welcoming us, but I'm getting some strange readings from their emotional patterns." Morrison nodded. "They're afraid of us. Can't blame them. We probably look like the enemy to them." The Nightfall moved slowly through the system, its sensors cataloging everything. The Vulcans had no military installations, no defense platforms, no weapons of any kind. Their technology was advanced but focused entirely on peaceful purposes. Their cities were works of art. Their ships were designed for beauty rather than function. "Sir," reported Sergeant Ben Clark from the tactical station, "I'm not seeing any defensive capabilities at all. Nothing. They're completely helpless." Morrison felt his jaw tighten. The Vulcans were like children walking through a forest, full of wolves. They had no idea how dangerous the galaxy really was. The Nightfall docked at the main orbital station above Vulcan Prime. The station was made of the same flowing crystal as the cities below, and it hummed with energy that felt warm and alive. Human boots on the crystal floor sounded harsh and mechanical. Commander Zeph Callan waited for them in the docking bay, along with a small group of other Velkan officials. His deer-like features were elegant and peaceful, but his large eyes showed the strain of weeks of terror. When he saw Morrison and his team, he stepped forward with traditional flower offerings. "Welcome to our world," Zeph said, his voice soft and musical. "We are grateful beyond words that you have come." Morrison took the flowers awkwardly. He was used to military protocols, not flower ceremonies. Behind him, Rodriguez and Clark exchanged glances. The cultural gap was wider than any of them had expected. "We came as soon as we could," Morrison replied. "We need to know everything about the enemy." Prime Counselor Thera Winson floated forward, her movements graceful, like water flowing. "We do not understand warfare," she said honestly. "Our people have never harmed another sentient being. We hoped perhaps you might negotiate with the offer them what they want in exchange for peace." Rodriguez stepped forward, her scientific mind trying to build bridges. "Can you show us the recordings of their attacks? Any communication attempts?" The Velkans led them to a crystal chamber, where holographic displays showed the destruction of 4 worlds. The images were horrific. Scarith ships descended like locusts, their crystalline hulls gleaming with organic fluids. They stripped everything living from the surface, processed it into biofuel, and moved on. There was no communication, no negotiation, no mercy. "They don't take prisoners," Clark observed, his voice grim. "They don't leave survivors. This isn't conquest. This is extermination." Morrison studied the attack patterns. The Scarith moved in perfect coordination, their hive mind allowing them to act as one massive organism. They were efficient, ruthless, and completely predictable. "Have you tried communicating with them?" he asked. Zeph nodded sadly. "Many times. They communicate through pheromones and electrical impulses. We built translation devices, sent messages in every format we could think of. They never responded. Because they don't see you as worth talking to," Morrison said bluntly. "You're just food to them." The Velkans recoiled from his harsh words, but Morrison continued. "That's not an insult. That's tactical information. They see you as prey, which means they're treating this like a hunt, not a war." Rodriguez pulled up biological data on the Scarith. They're insectoids with a hive mind structure. Individual warriors are controlled by queens, who are controlled by a central queen. They think in terms of consumption and expansion. "What do you know about their weaknesses?" Clark asked. The Velkans looked confused. "Weaknesses? We do not think in such terms." Morrison realized the scope of the problem. The Velkans were not just peaceful, they were incapable of thinking like predators. They had no concept of warfare, strategy, or even self-defense. "Listen carefully," he said. "We're going to help you, but you need to understand something. We're not here to negotiate. We're not here to find a peaceful solution. We're here to make the Scarith go away permanently." Thera's eyes widened. "You mean to fight them?" "We mean to hunt them," Morrison corrected. "There's a difference." Over the next several hours, the humans studied everything the Velkans had learned about the Scarith. The insects were powerful, numerous, and completely unified in their purpose. Their technology was biomechanical, grown rather than built. Their ships were living things that healed damage and adapted to threats. But Morrison saw something the Velkans had missed. "They've never faced real resistance," he told his team. "Look at these attack patterns. They're completely predictable. Because they've never needed to adapt." Rodriguez nodded. "They're like sharks. Perfect killers in their environment, but they've never had to evolve beyond that." Clark was studying the hive mind structure. Their communication system is their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. If we can disrupt it, we can turn their coordination against them. The Velkans listened to the human analysis with growing amazement. These strange beings from a small yellow star saw patterns that had been invisible to them. They spoke of war like it was a science. How do you know so much about fighting? Zeph asked. Morrison looked at him for a long moment. Because we're predators too. We just learned to be civilized predators. That night, the humans met privately in their quarters aboard the Nightfall. The ship felt like home after the flowing crystal architecture of the Vulcan station. They're like children, Rodriguez said sadly. Beautiful, innocent children who don't understand that monsters exist. The Scarith are coming, Clark reported. Our long-range sensors show their scouts in the outer system, maybe 2 weeks before the main force arrives. Morrison nodded. Then we have 2 weeks to teach the galaxy what happens when you threaten something under human protection. He activated the ship's communication system and sent a message back to Earth. Admiral Grant, we've assessed the situation. The Vulcans are everything, their message suggested. Peaceful, helpless, and about to be exterminated. He paused, choosing his words carefully. We're not going to let that happen. Initiating Phase 1 of Shepherd's Crook. The Scarith think they're hunting sheep. Time to show them what wolves look like. The message ended, and Morrison looked out at the peaceful world below. In 2 weeks, this system would become a battlefield. But it would not become a graveyard. Not while humans stood watch. The galaxy was about to learn that Earth's children had inherited more than just intelligence and technology. They had inherited the instincts of apex predators, and those instincts were about to be awakened. The Scarith Advance Fleet arrived at the edge of the Vulcan system like a plague of mechanical locusts. 27 bioships moved in perfect formation, their crystalline hulls pulsing with organic light. Each ship contained thousands of warriors, all controlled by a single hive mind that had consumed 4 worlds without meeting any real resistance. Queen Vextera, the regional commander, felt satisfaction pulse through the neural network. The Vulcans had sent no fleet to meet them, erected. No defenses, prepared, no resistance. It would be another easy harvest. What she did not know was that Captain Morrison had no intention of meeting them in open battle. Deep in the asteroid belt between the 5th and 6th planets, the USS Nightfall drifted silently among the rocks. Its hull was coated with sensor-dampening material that made it nearly invisible. Inside, the human crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for a kind of warfare the galaxy had never seen. First target is the scout ship on the outer edge, Morrison said, studying the tactical display. We hit it fast, leave no survivors, and disappear before they can respond. Lieutenant Rodriguez had been working around the clock to analyze biology. Their communication system is based on pheromone transmission through their ship's organic networks. If we can capture some of their chemical signatures, we can start feeding them false information. Sergeant Clark had been even busier. I've been studying their psychological profiles. They're hive-minded, which means they've never experienced individual fear. They don't understand the concept of psychological warfare. Morrison smiled grimly. Then it's time they learned. The Nightfall moved through the asteroid field like a ghost, its engines running silent. The Scarith scout ship was alone, separated from the main fleet by several million kilometers. It was exactly what Morrison had been waiting for. The attack lasted less than 3 minutes. The Nightfall emerged from behind an asteroid, fired a full spread of plasma torpedoes, and vanished again before the scout ship could even send a distress signal. The bioship died in a flash of green fire, its organic hull dissolving into space. But Morrison was not finished. As the wreckage drifted through space, Rodriguez deployed the first of her biological weapons. Modified earth fungi, designed to grow in the vacuum of space, attach themselves to the debris. When the Scarith came to investigate, the fungi would hitch a ride back to their ships. Phase 1 complete, Morrison reported. Now we wait. The Scarith main fleet arrived at the debris field 6 hours later. Queen Vexthora extended her senses through the hive mind, trying to understand what had happened. The scout ship was simply gone, destroyed by weapons that left no recognizable signature. Salvage drones collected the wreckage, bringing it aboard the command ship for analysis. The organic material was processed through the ship's digestive systems, breaking it down into usable components. The fungi went with it, spreading through the ship's living corridors like a disease. Rodriguez had designed the organisms carefully. They did not kill or cause damage. Instead, they altered the taste and smell of everything they touched. The Scarith food supplies began to taste wrong. The air carried unfamiliar scents. Most importantly, the chemical signals that allowed the hive mind to function became distorted. Within hours, the perfect coordination of the Scarith fleet began to break down. Warriors became confused, queens issued contradictory orders, and the hive mind experienced something it had never known. Static. But the humans were just getting started. Clark had been monitoring Scarith communications, learning their patterns and frequencies. He began broadcasting carefully crafted signals directly into their ships. The messages were simple: recordings of human laughter, screams of rage, and the sounds of Earth's most dangerous predators. The effect on the hive mind was immediate and devastating. The Scarith had evolved to process information as a collective consciousness. They had never encountered input that was designed to be disturbing rather than informative. The sounds of human emotion, filtered through their organic communication systems, became a form of psychological poison. Warriors began exhibiting erratic behavior. Some broke formation without orders. Others attacked empty space, fighting enemies that existed only in their disrupted minds. The Queen struggled to maintain control, but the static in their communication systems made it impossible to coordinate effectively. Morrison watched the chaos through long-range sensors and felt a predator's satisfaction. They're starting to understand that they're not the apex predators in this system. The psychological warfare escalated when Clark captured a Scarith warrior during a supply run. The insectoid was the size of a small vehicle, with razor claws and acid-dripping mandibles. Under normal circumstances, it would have been nearly impossible to defeat, but Clark did not fight it. Instead, he used sonic weapons to disrupt its connection to the hive mind. Isolated from the collective consciousness, the warrior became confused and disoriented. It had never experienced individual thought before, and the sensation was terrifying. Through careful interrogation, Clark learned about the Scarith's deepest fear: biological contamination. Their hive mind depended on chemical purity, and they had an instinctive terror of anything that might disrupt their perfect unity. They're afraid of being alone, Clark reported. Individual consciousness is their version of hell. Morrison nodded. Then let's give them nightmares. The humans began broadcasting detailed descriptions of Earth's diseases, parasites, and biological weapons directly into the Scarith ships. They described bacteria that consumed flesh, viruses that rewrote genetic code, and fungi that turned living tissue into zombie-like growths. None of it was real, but the Scarith did not know that. Their hive mind, already disrupted by the biological contamination and psychological warfare, began to turn on itself. Warriors started attacking each other, convinced that their comrades were infected. Queens ordered the sterilization of entire sections of their ships. The fleet that had arrived with perfect coordination was now consuming itself from within. But Morrison knew that the real test was still to come. Queen Vexthara was beginning to understand that she faced an enemy unlike any she had encountered before. The humans were not trying to defeat the Scarith in battle. They were trying to make them afraid to fight. Rodriguez reported that the biological contamination had spread through half the fleet. Their food tastes wrong, their air smells wrong, and their communication systems are full of static. They're starting to question their own senses. Clark's psychological warfare had reached new heights. I'm broadcasting the sound of human children laughing directly into their command ships. For some reason, that terrifies them more than screams or weapons fire. Morrison studied the tactical display, watching the Scarith fleet struggle with enemies they could not see or understand. They're apex predators who have never faced real resistance. They don't know how to handle fear. The humans had spent 2 weeks turning the Scarith's greatest strengths against them. Their hive mind coordination had become a weakness when filled with static. Their biological technology had become a vulnerability when contaminated with foreign organisms. Their fearless nature had become a liability when confronted with psychological warfare. But Morrison knew that Queen Vexthera would eventually adapt. The Scarith were not stupid, just inexperienced with this kind of warfare. Soon, she would realize that her only option was to retreat or commit everything to a final assault. "Sir," Rodriguez reported, "long-range sensors are detecting movement in the Scarith fleet. They're forming up for a major offensive." Morrison nodded. "Then it's time for Phase 2. Send a message to Vulcan Prime. Tell them to evacuate the civilians to the deep shelters." He looked out at the stars, where the Scarith fleet was preparing for what they thought would be a final battle. They still did not understand that they were not fighting a war. They were being hunted by creatures who had spent millions of years perfecting the art of killing things that were bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than themselves. The galaxy was about to witness what happened when Earth's apex predators stopped playing with their food. Queen Vexthera, as massive form, pulsed with rage as she surveyed the chaos that had consumed her fleet. Half her ships reported biological contamination, her warriors were attacking each other, and the hive mind itself was fragmenting under the weight of psychological warfare. In 17 conquered star systems, she had never encountered resistance like this. The time for subtlety was over. She activated the deep space communication array and sent a signal that would travel across the galaxy to the Scarith home worlds. The message was simple: send the Royal Guard. These were the elite warriors of the Scarith Empire, creatures that had been bred and modified specifically for warfare. Each one was the size of a small starship, with weapons grown into their bodies and minds linked directly to the Queen's consciousness. They had never retreated from a battle, never failed to conquer a world. 3 days later, the Royal Guard arrived in bioships that dwarfed even the main fleet. Their hulls were black and organic, grown from materials that could withstand the weapons of any known civilization. Inside each ship, 1,000 elite warriors waited for the order to hunt. Captain Morrison watched their approach from the command bridge of the Nightfall. The human destroyer was hidden deep in the cavern system beneath Vulcan Prime, where the crystalline cities had been built into the living rock. It was exactly where he wanted to be. "They're taking the bait," he reported to his team. "Royal Guard. Ships are moving into orbital positions. They'll start landing operations within the hour." Lieutenant Rodriguez finished her preparations with the sonic disruptors. The devices were hidden throughout the cavern system, ready to flood the underground passages with frequencies that would scramble Scarith neural patterns. The sound weapons are in position. Once they're activated, the hive mind communication will become impossible in these caves. Sergeant Clark had been working on the psychological aspect of the trap. "I've been analyzing their Royal Guard psychology. They're bred for perfection, which means they've never experienced failure. They don't know how to handle situations that don't go according to plan." Morrison nodded grimly. "Then we're going to teach them." The first Royal Guard warriors descended from their ships like falling stars, their massive forms protected by biological armor that could deflect energy weapons. They moved with the fluid precision of perfect predators, their hive mind coordination allowing them to function as a single organism. But as soon as they entered the cavern system, they lost their greatest advantage. The narrow passages negated their size advantage. The rocky walls interfered with their communication, and the darkness robbed them of their ability to coordinate effectively. Morrison had chosen the battlefield carefully. These caverns were where humanity's ancestors had hunted cave bears and saber-toothed tigers. In the darkness, with stone walls closing in around them, the humans were in their element. The first engagement lasted only minutes. A squad of Royal Guard warriors advanced down a narrow passage, their bioweapons glowing with deadly energy. They expected to find Vulcan civilians cowering in the depths. Instead, they found Captain Morrison and his team waiting in the shadows. The humans did not meet them head-on. Instead, they used the cavern walls to their advantage, firing from concealed positions and disappearing into side passages before the Scarith could respond. The Royal Guard warriors, bred for open combat, found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to stand still. Rodriguez activated the sonic disruptors, and the caverns filled with frequencies that scrambled Scarith neural patterns. The perfect coordination of the Royal Guard dissolved into chaos as individual warriors lost contact with the hive mind. For creatures that had never experienced individual consciousness, the sensation was terrifying. They began attacking each other, convinced that their isolation meant infection or contamination. Some simply shut down, their minds unable to process the concept of being alone. Clark's psychological warfare reached its peak as he broadcast the sounds of human children laughing directly into the cavern system. The innocent sound, filtered through the Scarith's disrupted communication networks, became a form of psychological torture. But the humans were not content to simply defend. Morrison led his team deeper into the cavern system, hunting the Royal Guard warriors in their own territory. The humans moved like pack hunters, surrounding isolated enemies and striking from multiple directions. The battle became a rout. The Royal Guard warriors, who had conquered 17 star systems, found themselves being systematically dismantled by humans who treated war as a science. Every advantage they possessed became a liability in the confined spaces of the caverns. Queen Vexthera, monitoring the battle from her command ship, watched in horror as her elite warriors were defeated one by one. The hive mind was filled with screams of confusion and terror as the Royal Guard experienced something they had never known, fear. But the humans were not finished. Rodriguez had been working on something special, a biological weapon designed specifically for the Scarith Queen. It was not designed to kill, but to do something far worse. To make her think, the weapon was a modified Earth virus, engineered to disrupt the neural pathways that allowed hive mind communication. When it reached the Queen's ship, it would not harm her physically. Instead, it would force her to experience individual consciousness for the first time in her life. Clark deployed the virus through the ship's air recycling system, and within hours, Queen Vexthera began to experience something that no Scarith Queen had ever known. She was alone in her own mind. The sensation was indescribable. For her entire existence, she had been connected to millions of other minds, sharing thoughts and experiences with the collective consciousness of her species. Now, suddenly, she was trapped in her own individual awareness. She tried to reconnect with the hive mind, but the virus had disrupted her neural pathways. She could sense the other minds around her, but she could not reach them. She was an individual, isolated and afraid. Morrison's voice came through the ship's communication system, calm and predatory. "Queen Vexthera, we need to talk." The Queen's massive form shuddered with fear. "What have you done to me?" "We've given you a gift," Morrison replied. "Individual consciousness. The ability to think for yourself. Most species consider it a blessing." "Make it stop," the Queen begged. "I cannot exist alone." Morrison's tone remained coldly professional. "You have two choices. You can retreat from this system and never return, or you can stay and experience individual consciousness until your mind breaks completely." The Queen's screams of terror echoed through the hive mind communication networks, reaching every Scarith ship in the system. The sound of their perfect queen, reduced to a frightened individual, sent waves of panic through the entire fleet. "Choose quickly," Morrison continued. "My people are very good at making others afraid. We can keep you isolated in your own mind for as long as we want." Queen Vexthera's response was immediate and desperate. "We will leave. We will never return to this system. Not good enough, Morrison said. You will leave this entire sector of space. You will tell every Scarith in the galaxy what happened here. And if we ever see your species again, we will not be so merciful. The Queen agreed instantly, her terror overwhelming her pride. The virus was neutralized, and she felt the blessed relief of reconnecting with the hive mind. But the experience had changed her. She now knew what it felt like to be alone, and the knowledge would haunt her forever. The Scarith fleet began its retreat within hours, their bioships fleeing the system like frightened animals. The Royal Guard warriors who had survived the cavern battles were recalled to their ships, their perfect confidence shattered by their first taste of defeat. Morrison watched them go from the command bridge of the Nightfall, his predator's instincts satisfied. The humans had not just defeated the Scarith, they had broken them psychologically. Mission accomplished, he reported to Admiral Grant. The Scarith are retreating. The Velkan Republic is secure. But as he looked out at the stars, Morrison knew that something fundamental had changed. The galaxy had just witnessed what happened when humanity decided to protect something. The peaceful species would sleep more soundly knowing that Earth's apex predators were watching over them. The Scarith would never forget the lesson they had learned in the caverns beneath Velkan Prime. They had discovered that being an apex predator was not about size or strength or numbers. It was about intelligence, adaptability, and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to survive. And in that regard, humans had no equal. 3 months after the Scarith retreat, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Hivemind Empire that had conquered 17 star systems without meeting serious resistance had withdrawn completely from the outer territories. Their bioships fled to the deepest parts of space, carrying with them the memory of a species that fought with weapons beyond their understanding. Admiral Jake Morrison, recently promoted for his success in the Velkan campaign, stood in the newly constructed Earth's embassy on Velkan Prime. The building was a curious blend of human efficiency and Velkan artistry, with crystal spires rising from reinforced steel foundations. It was beautiful and functional, much like the alliance between the two species. Commander Zeph Callan approached with his usual graceful stride, though there was something different in his deer-like features. The desperate fear that had marked their first meeting was gone, replaced by a confidence that came from knowing powerful allies stood ready to protect his people. Admiral Zeph said, offering the traditional flower greeting. The Council has approved the Mutual Defense Treaty. Our worlds are now officially under Earth's protection. Morrison accepted the flowers with more comfort than he had shown months earlier, and Earth gains access to Velkan biotechnology and cultural exchange programs. Both species benefit. But even as he spoke the diplomatic words, Morrison could see the deeper changes in Velkan society. The peaceful herbivores were learning concepts they had never needed before. Their children played games that involved strategy and competition. Their artists created works that explored themes of conflict and resolution. We are different now, Zeph admitted quietly. Not violent, but no longer naive. We understand that the galaxy contains both beauty and darkness. Morrison nodded. Understanding danger doesn't make you dangerous. It makes you wise. The transformation was not limited to the Velkans. Across the galaxy, the news of humanity's victory had spread through every communication network. The species that had ignored the Velkans' plea for help now sent careful diplomatic messages to Earth, testing the waters of potential alliance. The hegemony, with their advanced technology and vast fleets, offered trade agreements and technology exchanges. The Kran Empire, known for their military might, proposed joint training exercises and mutual defense pacts. Smaller species simply asked to be remembered as friends if trouble ever came to their worlds. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, now serving as Earth's chief xenobiologist, reviewed the diplomatic requests with amusement. 6 months ago, most of these species had never heard of humans. Now they're all eager to be our allies. Fear is a powerful motivator, observed Captain Ben Clark, who had taken over Morrison's old position, but it's not the kind of foundation we want for lasting relationships. Morrison agreed. We need to show them that humans are more than just predators. We're protectors, explorers, and builders. The galaxy needs to see all sides of humanity. The cultural exchange programs were already showing results. Human artists worked alongside Vulcan composers to create music that blended the aggressive energy of Earth with the peaceful harmony of Vulcan Prime. Human engineers learned to grow buildings from living crystal, while Vulcan discovered the elegant simplicity of human, mechanical designs. But the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed conflict itself. For centuries, the older species had assumed that peace was the natural state of civilized beings. The Scarith had been an aberration, a throwback to more primitive times. Humanity's victory had shown them something different. Sometimes, the only way to preserve peace was to be willing to fight for it. The galaxy needed protectors, species, that could stand against the darkness and ensure that the peaceful civilizations could continue to exist. Morrison received a priority communication from Earth as he reviewed the latest diplomatic reports. Admiral Lisa Grant's face appeared on the holographic display, her expression serious. Jake, we've got a situation developing in the Outer Rim. The Devourers have been spotted near the Crystalline Confederation. 3 worlds have gone silent. In the past week, Morrison felt his predator instincts sharpen. The Devourers were a machine intelligence that consumed entire star systems to fuel their expansion. They were older and more dangerous than the Scarith, and they had been dormant for over a century. Orders, Admiral. Same as before. Take a small task force and remind the galaxy what happens when they threaten innocent species. Morrison smiled grimly. Understood. We'll show them that Earth's children are still watching. The communication ended, and Morrison began planning his next operation. The Scarith had been defeated through psychological warfare and biological weapons. The Devourers would require different tactics, but the principle remained the same. Find the enemy's weakness and exploit it ruthlessly as he worked. Morrison thought about the conversation he had shared with Zeph earlier. The Vulcans had changed, but so had humanity. The species that had once fought wars among themselves had found a new purpose in protecting others. Commander Zeph found him in the embassy's planning room, surrounded by holographic displays of star charts and tactical analyses. The Vulcan's large eyes showed concern. Another threat? Zeph asked quietly. Morrison nodded. The Devourers. They're attacking the Crystalline Confederation in the Outer Rim. Zeph's expression grew troubled. The crystalline species are even more peaceful than we are. They communicate through light patterns and have never developed any form of defense technology. Then they need us, Morrison said simply. Will you succeed against these Devourers as you did against the Scarith? Morrison considered the question. Seriously, I don't know, but we'll try. That's what protectors do. Zeph placed a gentle hand on Morrison's shoulder. When we first called for help, we had no idea what we were asking for. We wanted someone to save us. We did not realize we were asking Earth to send its most dangerous children to become the galaxy's guardians. Morrison looked up from his tactical displays. We're not the most dangerous humans, Zeph. We're just the ones who answered the call. The next day, Morrison's task force departed for the Outer Rim, carrying with them the hopes of another helpless species. The USS Nightfall led a small fleet of Earth's finest ships, crewed by volunteers who had answered the call to protect those who could not protect themselves. As they jumped to faster-than-light speed, Morrison reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate message from Vulcan Prime. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors or explorers, but as the species that others called when the darkness threatened to consume the light. The galaxy had learned that Earth's children were apex predators, but they had also learned something more important. These predators chose to hunt the monsters that threatened the innocent. Behind them, Vulcan Prime continued, its slow orbit around its yellow sun, its crystal cities gleaming in the light. The flowers still bloomed in the cloud forests, and the peaceful people still created art and music and beauty. But now they slept soundly, knowing that somewhere in the darkness between the stars, humanity stood watch. The message that had started it all, Commander Zeph's desperate plea for help, had changed the galaxy forever. They had asked for help, and Earth had sent its apex predators. But those predators had chosen to become something more than killers. They had become protectors, and the galaxy was safer for it. In the depths of space, other threats stirred, and plotted and prepared for conquest. But they would discover, as the Scarith had discovered, that the galaxy was no longer defenseless. Earth's children were watching, and they had inherited more than just intelligence and technology. They had inherited the instincts of apex predators, and they had chosen to use those instincts to protect the innocent and preserve the peace. The galaxy would never be the same.